Open your fridge. The milk. The butter. The block of cheese you bought without thinking. The yogurt in the back. If there's a baby in the house, the tin of formula on the counter. There is a reasonable chance that one family in a small French town owns most of it. Not a corporation with a public board, not a name you'd recognize from a stock ticker. A family, 3 siblings, a holding company registered in Belgium, and a man who has given almost no interviews in 26 years as chief executive. His name is Emmanuel Besnier. He runs Lactalis. Lactalis is the largest dairy company on Earth. Not in France, not in Europe. On Earth. Bigger than Nestle, bigger than Danone. And in 2025, it moved 31.2 billion euros through 266 plants across 51 countries. You have never heard of them. That was the point. But this story does not end with a family who quietly got rich. It ends with a courtroom, a chemical almost nobody in France can test for, and a question about what happens when the machinery that feeds infants is owned by people who answer to no one. Let's start with the cheese. October 19th, 1933. A young man named André Besnier buys 35 liters of milk from farmers around Laval. He makes 17 camemberts. That's it. That's the entire company. He calls the cheese Le Petit Lavallois, the little one from Laval, and he sells it. André dies in 1955. His son Michel takes over a business with 50 employees. Michel is the one who understands something the rest of the industry misses. He doesn't build, he buys. Michel launches the President brand in 1968. He becomes the first to package milk in UHT cartons. He pushes Brie into the American market under names invented to sound French to Americans. Brie Lafayette, Joan of Arc. He acquires, he absorbs, keeps his mouth shut. Then, in the year 2000, Michel Besnier dies suddenly. His son Emmanuel is 29 years old, and the industry assumes the family firm is about to get eaten. They had it exactly backwards. Since taking over, Emmanuel Besnier has bought roughly 124 companies. Not merged with. Bought. Galbani, the giant of Italian cheese. Parmalat, Italy's national milk producer, taken in 2011 for 2.5 billion euros in a fight the Parmalat board resisted, and the Italian government resisted, and Lactalis won anyway. Stonyfield Farm, Siggy's. Kraft's natural cheese business, $3.2 billion, and the American Department of Justice made him sell off 2 brands just to let the deal through. In June 2025, he took General Mills' yogurt business, Yoplait, Go-Gurt. Oui. That single purchase made a French family the 3rd largest fresh dairy player in the United States. In April 2026, he closed on Fonterra's global consumer brands, Anchor, Mainland, Western Star. Overnight, his Oceania workforce goes from 11,000 people to more than 15,000. Rabobank, the bank that tracks this industry, wrote in 2025 that the appetite for acquisitions appears insatiable. Here is the number nobody quotes. Every year, Lactalis processes 22.8 billion liters of raw milk. That is roughly twice the entire annual milk production of the nation of Argentina, flowing through the pipes of one family's company. Which raises an obvious question. If you are that big and that private and answerable to no shareholders at all, who exactly is watching? In late 2017, babies in France started getting sick. 36 of them in France alone, then cases in Spain, then Greece. All of them had been fed powdered infant formula, mostly under the Picot and Millimel labels, made at a Lactalis plant in a town called Crayon. 12 million packages were pulled. 83 countries. Emmanuel Besnier, the man who does not speak, was summoned to a French parliamentary inquiry. He told them a renovation had released bacteria hiding inside the building. He said, quote, "It was an accident. Nobody inside the factory was responsible." Then the Institut Pasteur ran the genetics. The same strain had been in that plant since 2005. 12 years. Pasteur identified 25 additional babies who fell ill between 2006 and 2016. A separate outbreak in 2005 had sickened 141. And Lactalis' own testing had found salmonella on a production line. The company did not report it because the bacteria had not been found in the milk itself. An expert study submitted to investigators in 2022 described what it found inside the company as, quote, "a lack of vigilance or even blindness." In February 2023, Lactalis and the crayon factory were criminally charged. Aggravated deception, involuntary bodily harm, failure to execute a recall order. The case is still open. Months after the scandal broke, Lactalis spent 740 million euros acquiring another infant formula business. The global baby formula market is worth $51 billion. It would be easier if crayon were an isolated failure. August 2016. French dairy farmers blockade the Laval headquarters over milk prices. The dispute gets so loud the government has to step in. October 2020. An investigation by the outlet Disclose and the newspaper Le Monde documents more than a decade of pollution from at least 10 Lactalis facilities. Untreated whey discharged into rivers, including the Orne and the Mayenne. July 2023. Lactalis Australia fined $950,000 Australian dollars for breaching the Dairy Code of Conduct. February 2024. Spain fines Lactalis 11.69 million euros for running a milk-buying cartel with rival firms. The cartel operated for 13 years. That same month, French financial crime officers raid Lactalis offices and Emmanuel Besnier's private mansion. Later that year, the company agrees to pay 475 million euros to French tax authorities over financing structures routed through Belgium and Luxembourg. Every one of those is a fine, a settlement, a number on a page. Against 31 billion euros in revenue, they are the cost of doing business. And then came January 2026. Lactalis announces a voluntary recall. 6 batches of Picot infant formula, 18 countries, Australia, Chile, China, Colombia, Congo, Czechia, Ecuador, France, Georgia, Greece, Kuwait, Madagascar, Mexico, Monaco, Spain, Peru, Taiwan, Uzbekistan. The reason is a toxin called cereulide. It came in an ingredient, an omega-6 oil from an outside supplier. Nestle recalled from more than 60 countries. Danone pulled product too. 3 of the largest dairy companies on the planet tripped by the same single supplier. French prosecutors opened investigations into the deaths of 2 infants who had consumed recalled Nestle formula. No causal link has been established. That needs saying plainly. But here is what a French food safety lawyer pointed out to Radio France. Only one laboratory in all of France can test for cereulide. Access to it requires bureaucratic approval, and no laboratory can detect the toxin in a patient's samples at all. A baby drinks a bottle every 3 hours. In February 2026, France cut the acceptable daily exposure limit for cereulide by more than half, from 0.03 micrograms per kilogram of body weight down to 0.014, which means everything sold before that day was legal. Lactalis has never gone public. Across 3 generations, 93 years, and 124 acquisitions, there is no evidence the family has ever seriously wanted to. No shareholders, no quarterly calls, no activist investors. Emmanuel Besnier and his 2 siblings still control the whole thing through a Belgian holding company. His sister Marie holds around 21%. She has given fewer interviews than he has. They took a shed that made 17 camemberts, and turned it into the arteries of the global milk supply. That is, on its own terms, an extraordinary thing to have built. The uncomfortable part is what the size bought them. Not just scale. Distance. Distance between the man in Laval and the plant in Crayon. Between the balance sheet and the bottle. When a company gets large enough and private enough, the fines stop functioning as punishment and start functioning as a line item. That is the lesson, and it is the only one this story has. Concentration does not just create power. It creates the space to look away. Open your fridge again. Look at the labels. President, Galbany, Parmalat, Siggy's, Stonyfield, Yoplait, Anchor, Mainland, Kraft, Leerdammer. One family, one town. One door you have opened 10,000 times without once wondering who was standing on the other side of it. If you want to keep finding out who actually owns the things in your house, subscribe. That's the whole channel. This is what we do here. Because there is another one. A company you have also never heard of that owns the boxes almost everything you have ever bought arrived inside of. And they are more powerful than this one.